basically we are going to look at the brain and the spinal cord. So what are the expectations of the lesson today? We expect to study about the structure of the spinal cord, the components of the central nervous system, particularly the spinal cord and the brain. And then in details, we shall look at the structure of the spinal cord, the functions of the spinal cord, and then we shall look at the structure of the mammalian brain, and then we shall sum it over with the functions of the mammalian brain. And so what are the references for the day? As usual, I used Jeff Howard 2000, Macmillan Secondary Biology, the international edition. But today's question is just going to come from what I am going to teach about today. And so if by the end of this lesson you are able to compare and contrast between gray matter and white matter of the CNS, and then the cerebrum and the cerebellum of the brain, then you will have understood what I have told today. You'll be the best student there is. And so the reference question for today is going to be that. You're going to compare for me the gray matter and the white matter of the brain and the spinal cord, and also you compare for me the cerebrum and the cerebellum. Remember, I said when we are attempting any question on compare and contrast, you write the similarities, and then after you write the differences. It's not only one-sided. So I expect both the similarities and the differences. To start with the lesson, back to the central nervous system. As I said, the central nervous system, basically here we are going to look at two major organs of the body. That is the spinal cord and then the brain. These two are the CPUs of our body, just like we call them the central nervous system. They're like the central processing units of our body. They control all the activities our body do, all the actions we do, our response, our intelligence, our personality, our emotions, our character, response to the changes in the external environment, the reflex actions we do, both from the upper part of our body and the lower part of our body. All those responses that we do, oftentimes after thinking about them, or sometimes when we've not even thought about them. These two major organs are just behind them. So today I want you to know, why is it that some students, or some people, not students okay, actually, some people are naturally slow learners? And why is it that some people are FLs, they're fast learners? Why is it that some people in society, they are high regarded as being intellects? That they are intelligent, they have very good emotional intelligence, they have very good social intelligence, and they are unique. Some of them are regarded as high officials, even when they do not have money as such, but they're those characters in the society, irrespective of the offices or irrespective of their roles they play in the society, but there is that person you hold in high regard of, because of how they handle, they carry themselves, because of how they conduct themselves, because of how they handle the reactions and emotions of other people. And there are those people you can easily confide in. There are those people then you think, there are people who are naturally extroverted, that they are so outgoing, they speak whatever comes to their mind, they are so jumpy here and there. And then there are people who are so reserved, calm, kind, and they are withdrawn. Like you find them to their own. And then there are people in class who are very good at mathematics. Oh my God, when it comes to mathematics, that person will not study. It will not study the lessons or will not revise, but when the person is given a paper, they will smash it to the distinction ones. And then there are those people who are not very good at mathematics, but when it comes to history, okay, the humanities, the arts and humanities subjects, they are very good. And then we have people who are very good at religious studies. And then we have people who are not very good in class, but then they are very good in the co-curricular activities. Say they are very good in MDD, sports, football, netball, swimming, and we call those things talents. How are those things brought about in our body? How unique are we? These two major organs are so important in bringing about the uniqueness of whatever I have talked about. There are people who are very good in class and they are very good in sports. There are students who will be always out of school doing sports everywhere, moving different parts, and then you are in class studying from day one up to the last end of school. And then this person misses like a month, but when they come back to school, even if they have not read, they sit a paper together with you who spent an entire week reading for the exam, and this person will bang you seriously. Or there are some people who are naturally intelligent, whereby they'll go home, they are sickly. They go home, they are sick, and they spend there over a month, and then they come back when you're going to do end of term exams, and they come back today and tomorrow of their exams, and they have not read. And you've been at school studying every day, you've read, you've had even a timetable, personal reading timetable together with a school timetable, and then you sit for the exam and this person who was sick bangs you seriously. How does that come about? How come some people are intelligent? How come some people, no. How come some people are naturally fast learners and others are naturally slow learners? And what determines that? That is what you're going to look at today. The central nervous system, your brain. How does it determine your personality? How does it determine your nature? For you in a public, you're always referred to as a nuisance, your brain. And then there are those who are held in regards, that those students you look at in school and the way they carry themselves, oh my God, they are more than even some of the adults around the community. So we are going to look at that today. So when you look at I'll start with the spinal cord. The central nervous system are made up of these two major organs, the spinal cord and the brain. But the major two components of the central nervous system, it's made up of two major parts. One called the gray matter, another one called the white matter. These two parts, you find them well labeled both in the human brain, not in the human brain alone, in the mammalian brain, also in the spinal cord. And they alternate. In the spinal cord, the gray matter is way inside and white matter is outside. And then in the brain, the gray matter is outside and the white matter is inside, but both consist of these two major parts. And so what is gray matter and what is white matter? Gray matter is kind of gray in color. That is why it got its name gray matter. And then white matter is also white in color, and that's why it gets its name white matter. When you look at the structure of the spinal cord, I request the producer to project it on your screen. The spinal cord is cylindrical mass of, it's a cylindrical organ that extends from your brain. Please, the spinal cord, not the brain. The spinal cord, not the brain. The cylindrical, that one. It's a cylindrical, hollow organ that extends from your brain towards the end of the vertebral column, or what you call the end of the tail. It always flows through the vertebral column or the backbone. So it's always found in between the bones of the vertebral column. And it runs from the from the lower part of your head region, and it goes up to the lower part of your back towards your anal area. That is the spinal cord. In other organisms such as fish, for those people who are fond of eating fish whose bones are intact, and then after you get that soup that is in between the backbone of fish. It's like a creamy white, semi-solid compound in between the bones of fish. It's kind of fatty in nature. That is what you call the spinal cord. It just runs the entire backbone of an organism, or the backbone of fish, or any vertebrate. That is why it is found always. When you look at it keenly, here it has been expanded, as seen under as it has been magnified to be bigger than how it is always. When you look at it, you can see it has the gray matter, the gray stuff that is in the middle that has a letter H. That is the middle, the center part. It is gray in color. And then surrounding it, there is that creamy, can I call it creamy kind of a structure that is creamy or orange? That is the white matter. So the gray matter in the spinal cord is in, and the white matter is outside. And in the middle of the gray matter, we are having a small hole, like a canal. And that canal contains a fluid we call the cerebrospinal fluid, which always cushions and acts as a shock absorber to the spinal cord, meaning that it acts, it provides all the necessary nutrients needed by the spinal cord and also cushions it against shock and mechanical injury. When you look at the spinal cord very keenly, you can see it is divided into the dorsal area, that is the upper side, and then the ventral area, that is the lower side. So in the dorsal area, you're seeing the dorsal root, then you're seeing the dorsal root ganglion. And then under the dorsal root ganglion, you're having the sensory neuron, which is green in color, with its head as an axon branch coming away from it. And then the sensory neuron is moving through the dorsal root ganglion, and then it goes and enters the gray matter. From the gray matter, it connects to the interneuron, what you call the relay neuron. Here, the relay neuron is blue. I hope that is blue or purple in color. It is only located in the gray matter or within the spinal cord. And then after, we're having the ventral root at the bottom from the interneuron, and that ventral root contains what you call the motor neuron. That runs from the relay neuron. It's also purple in color, the same color as the relay neuron, and then it runs away via the ventral root. So what does that mean? That the spinal cord has neurons in it. The neurons, remember we said a neuron is the basic structure unit of the central nervous system. It's through these neurons that information from the different body parts is relayed or is sent from the receptors to the central nervous system, which is here is the spinal cord, which is going to perceive, then it will interpret, to integrate, process the information brought, and then it will determine the feedback, which is sent back to the part that is exposed to the external environmental stimulus in order for you to respond. And so when you look at the structure of the spinal cord here very well, you can see that in the gray matter, which is the central part of the spinal cord, basically we are having the interneuron, we are having the cerebrospinal fluid, then we are having also the dendrites of the neurons, and then maybe we're also having the cell body of the motor neuron. So those are the major parts that are found within the gray matter. Outside the gray matter, in the dorsal root ganglion, we are having only and only sensory neurons, or what you call receptor neurons. Neurons that carry information from the receptors towards the spinal cord. And it also consists of the cell body of the sensory neurons within the dorsal root ganglion. So at the bottom, where we are having the ventral root, that's where we are having the entire nerve, the dendron and the axon of the motor neuron. And so the white matter, which is outside the gray matter, particularly contains the dendrons, the dendron, the axons of the neurons, that is the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. But the ventral root consists of only effector neurons, such as the motor neurons that transport information from the from the gray matter or from the spinal cord towards the effectors, which are either the muscles or the glands, which must contract in order for it to respond to a change in the external environment. And then the dorsal root ganglion, consisting of only the sensory neurons that transfer information from the receptors to the central nervous system, where it is relayed, interpreted, processed, integrated, and the feedback is determined. So if you look at the differences between the gray matter and the white matter, I said here in the spinal cord, the gray matter is inside, as you can see. It has that letter H inside the spinal cord. It is inside, and the white matter is outside. And I said in the gray matter is gray in color, naturally. When you cut across your spinal cord and your brain, and you meet the gray matter, it will be having that gray color. And then the white matter will be having that white color. So those are differences between the gray matter and the white matter. And then also, the gray matter in the spinal cord here, as we can see, it consists of the intermediate neuron or the relay neuron. It consists of the axons of, the cell body of the motor neuron. It also consists of the dendrites of both the sensory and the motor neuron. Whereas the white matter here, we are having basically the axons and the dendrons of the sensory and the motor neuron. So that is another difference between the two, the gray matter and the white matter. And so what is the function of the spinal cord? The spinal cord is always located within your backbone, that is below the head region. And so its major purpose or function is to control all spinal reflexes. What are these spinal reflexes? I remember telling you that all reflex actions that are done by the body, but they are done from under your head, are controlled by the spinal cord, such as withdrawal of a hand from a hot object, a knee jerk, that is when you step on a thorn or hot object and all of a sudden you bend your knee by removing your leg. That's a spinal reflex. Like responding to a tickle, that's a spinal reflex. So all those reflex actions that involve body parts that are below your brain are controlled and coordinated by the spinal cord. Then the other function of the spinal cord is it relays information to the brain. Since it runs through your backbone and then comes up to the head region. So the information that is from the other body parts, the external sense organs and the receptors that are below the brain, the impulses can be relayed across the spinal cord towards your brain, whereby the two coordinate and they interpret that information to bring about a response. And so those are the two major or basic information of the, basic function of the spinal cord. The other function of the spinal cord that I can talk about is it links nerves of one region of the body to those of the adjacent region. Say, the nerves of the nerves that are within the forearm, and the nerves of the leg region, thigh and the leg region. These nerves are linked together by the spinal cord because they are below the head region. So those are the three basic functions of the spinal cord. And now let me look at the brain. Just like the spinal cord, the brain is also made up of the gray matter and the white matter. This is the most sensitive organ of the body. It's a large mass of an organ. It is always enclosed in a bony case within our head region. When you touch your face, there's that bony case we call the cranium or the skull that encloses the entire brain in. It is very delicate, and so it's always protected by the skull against mechanical damage. When you look at it, the brain weighs close to 1.4 kilograms of an adult mammal. Close to. I'm not saying it's exactly 1.4 kilograms. It can be slightly above or slightly lower, depending on the size of an organism and maybe the level of classification of an organism according to the different kingdom systems. So it's to the mammal, it is close to 1.4 kilograms. And I'll request the producer to project it on your screen. So it weighs about that. It is one in higher vertebrates. Higher vertebrates here I'm looking at the primates. Higher vertebrates, when we're classifying organisms, we said we have kingdoms. There are 5 kingdoms. Where we had kingdom Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Monera, Protoctista. So of the kingdoms, Kingdom Animalia has one of the most developed brains. And under Kingdom Animalia, we have several phyla, which are around 9. We had Porifera, Nidaria, Mollusca, Annelida. Then we have Chordata, and then of the different phyla under Kingdom Animalia, it's phylum Chordata that has the most advanced brain. And then under Chordata, we're having vertebrates and the invertebrates. Then of the vertebrates and the invertebrates, the vertebrates have the highest developed brain. And then under vertebrates, now we are having 5 major classes, where we're having reptilia, where we have reptiles, amphibia, where we're having amphibians, and then we're having pisces, where we're having fish, aves, where we have birds, and then lastly we have class Mammalia, where we're having mammals. So of the 5 classes, class Mammalia has organisms of the most developed brains. And then under class Mammalia, then we're having different other mammals there. We're having the apes, we're having man. So of the organisms under, of the mammals we're having, it's man, me and you, we have the most developed brains of all. So I'd request the producer to project the structure of the brain on the screen. So the volume of the human brain is much larger than the volume of our close relatives, the apes. If you realize that we are almost, our morphology and our lineage is so close to the apes. But when it comes to intelligence, man is far way better than the apes, because for us the volume of our brain is quite far way bigger than that of the apes, that we reason at a higher rate compared to the apes. So when you look at our body weight, the mammals, 2% of our body weight is the brain. And the brain is almost 75% water. And so dehydration of the body has a major effect on the brain. In most cases, when we are dehydrated, we get what you call, how do you call Kamonguluze in English? We get dizzy, yeah. We get dizzy, we start experiencing dizziness. So dehydration or water is very important for the proper functioning of the brain. And then also blood. The brain, as an organ of our body, receives the highest percentage of blood to our body. Actually, not only blood, but also neurons. So in any case, the blood flow to our brain reduces, then we shall get conditions of unconsciousness. Most people who become unconscious is because they do not have enough blood supply to their brain. And not only blood, because blood always, when it's being supplied to a particular area, it not only goes with the nutrients, but it also goes with oxygen. And so if the brain does not receive enough blood and oxygen, then we become unconscious. When you look at the structure of the brain, it receives the highest number of neurons in our body. The brain has close to 100 billion neurons. We all should remember that I said a neuron is the basic structure unit of the central nervous system. Neurons come and interject with one another, forming synapses across which messages are relayed from one part of the body to another. So the ability for you to reason very fast, the ability for you to interpret, integrate information very fast, is determined by the size of the axon of the neurons, the number of neurons in your brain, and whether the neurons in your brain are myelinated or not. And so that is how we differ in our intellects as individuals. And so that is what you should know. We have more neurons in the brain compared to any other part of the body. When I look at the structure of the brain here, we have 3 major parts of the brain. We're having the forebrain, then we're having the midbrain, and then we're having the hind brain. When I talk about the forebrain, it's not as seen from your forehead. Nti abantu abayina empumi, bebayina obwongo bungi. No. The forebrain is as seen from above. The biggest part of the brain is forebrain. It's made up of 3 basic structures. It's made up of the cerebrum. It's also made up of the hypothalamus. Before then, there is also the thalamus. And then we are having the pituitary gland. These major parts are parts of the forebrain, as you can see projected on the screen. So the forebrain takes the biggest mass of your brain. I am saying not as seen from your face, but as seen from above, your entire head region. The forebrain is that upper part of the entire brain. It is the most folded part of your brain. It takes the biggest percentage and the biggest mass of your brain. Then beneath the forebrain, we're having the midbrain. When you look at this arrow very well, the midbrain is that red colored part. And then the midbrain just is a link between the forebrain and the hind brain. And then the hind brain, as you can see, it is made up of parts such as the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, and the pons. Those are the three major parts of the hind brain. In most cases, students tend to confuse the cerebrum and the cerebellum. The two are different, first in spelling. This one is this. There is B-R-U-M, and the other one is B-E-L-L-U-M. So the cerebrum, the cerebellum are totally different, and they are located on different parts of the brain. The cerebrum is in the forebrain. The cerebellum is in the hind brain. There are no major parts in the midbrain. However, we shall look at it. And so we are going to look at how each of these parts of the brain are very important in determining our nature, in controlling the body activities, and in bringing about our different traits and personalities as individuals. We start with the forebrain. The forebrain, as I said, it's made up of the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the biggest part of the brain. It's the biggest part of the brain, the highly folded part of the brain, as you can see on your screen. And it is divided into what you call hemispheres. In other structures in the books, you find when they are being called the lobes. You find there's the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the hind lobes. And then in other books, you find when they are called the cerebral hemispheres. So the hemispheres are basically two in number, and the surface of the entire cerebrum is what you call the cerebral cortex. That is the surface of the cerebrum. And as I said, it's the most folded part of your brain, taking the biggest mass of your brain. And so if it's the biggest part of your brain and the most folded part of your brain, what is the function of the cerebrum? One, all voluntary activities are controlled by the cerebrum. What are these voluntary activities? I mean, things that we do when we are aware of them. We think about them, and then we do them. Like, you may think of walking. You may think of singing, dancing, or you may think of running. You might think of doing a particular activity, and even you give it time. You'll be like, you know what? Now I think, let me do laundry, let me do dishes, and maybe by towards midday, I think that is when I'll prepare our lunch, or maybe towards 4, I think that's when I'll start preparing our dinner. So all activities that we do voluntarily, a voluntary activity is coordinated. It is controlled by the brain. So you think about it, and then you do it. So it is a center for voluntary activities, as I've talked about. And so it controls a lot of your thinking. The next function of the cerebrum, which is the biggest part of your brain, is it controls reasoning. the ability for a human being to reason in a particular way. In a society, we've seen people who reason really. You bring your thing, or maybe your idea out, and you think it's the best. Then you throw it out there, and people out-reason you, yet you had a very good idea. If you're not able to defend it, then your cerebrum is what? It's not giving you enough chance to express yourself. So the ability to reason, when you're given a math expression, I mean, when we are doing mathematics on the blackboard, the examples are very easy and simple. But when you're given a particular math number, whereby you have to think and apply a particular formula to bring about an answer, it requires a lot of reasoning. And so our cerebrum, so it controls a lot of reasoning. In most concepts that require reasoning, some people will not be there. There are some groups of people who, when something requires a lot of reasoning, you will not find them there. They want simple things that come on the surface. So, cerebrum, it also controls memory, the ability for you to memorize things. You know, there are people who are too forgetful. I mean, you'll talk to students and then they'll tell you they are reading. They can read. There are students who can read. They read in the morning, lunchtime, then books, all through preps. And when it comes to an exam, they get 0 too. You ask them, but madam, I forgot all the things that I read. I mean, the cerebrum, memory. Some people can forget to the extent of them forgetting wearing underwears or knickers. Forgetfulness, forgetting people's names, forgetting things easily. Some people can move with stuff somewhere or keys, and wherever you sit for you, your keys remain there. For you know you cannot move with a handkerchief. Wherever you stand or where you rest from, the handkerchief remains. You easily forget. Memory is controlled by the cerebrum. The next thing is learning. So most of these things are class things, the things we do in formal education that is in school. The ability to learn new things. There are people who can easily learn something. That when a person is in class and the teacher is teaching, that person doesn't need to go back and read. No. The moment that person has attended class and the teacher has talked about the cerebrum being the biggest part of the brain, most folded in the forebrain, that is already coded in their cerebrum. So the cerebrum controls learning, the ability to learn new things, to do activities. There are some people who learn at first hand. Even these things we do, call them what? Crafts? I don't know how to put it. The skills, like someone is just shown to do something, or maybe to weave a basket. You don't need to teach them the second time. They get it from the first time. That is ability to learn new things, basically are controlled by your cerebrum. Then intelligence. Here, intelligence is divided into several things. We have emotional intelligence, like how do you handle your emotions in public? How do you handle other people's emotions? How do you perceive them? How do you handle people's reactions? There are some people who are very intelligent when it comes to handling emotions. Then there's what you call social intelligence. Someone is just so social, for God's sake. They have friends, they make friends easily. Wherever they move, they are so friendly. And by the way, being friendly is different from being extroverted. Being extroverted means you easily express your thoughts easily out. You easily speak out your ideas. Most extroverted people do not keep secrets. But a person can be social, can have very many friends, but that person can even keep secrets. That different people, many people in the society look at you, they emulate you, they can trust you with their hidden agendas, and they can tell you something and you can keep it. You always there for people. You help. Most of people with a high social intelligence end up being very good leaders. Even in school, you've seen such leaders. Like someone comes in senior 1 and has friends. That person is in school for 1 week and has friends all over through all the classes and even all the teachers. And that is what you call social intelligence. So intelligence is determined again by the cerebrum. Personality. So all the things I've talked about then come back to your personality as an individual. How do you carry yourself? How do you react to particular changes in the external environment? How do you react to criticism? There are some people who really will not allow criticism. For them, they are perfect. I mean, they are perfect. How do you tell that person that, this is not right? I mean, they're perfect. And there are people who are so domineering naturally, like they want to be dominant everywhere. Yeah, it's a trait within us. Then there are people who are calm, cool, reserved, and a bit considerate. Then there are people who are not considerate at all. They are sarcastic. Tell him something, you find it somewhere. And they will even blast you in front of any person without any shame. And they will not even mind about it. That is them. Personality is highly determined by the cerebrum. Then, emotions. Our emotions, how we handle emotions, it's basically the cerebrum. The emotions, the feelings of the feelings of pain, hunger, anger management. Some of us tusala wa emirundi nga 17 olunaku. 17 times. Short-tempered. The people who are so cool, and you may think they have a fridge or a freezer in their minds. They are so cool. And then there are some people whereby just disrupt that person. You find them in their peace, just disrupt him. And then you see how volcanic eruption. So the emotions of a person, how they handle changes in the external environment, how do they perceive other people's reactions? There are some people who are so kind to themselves, but more kind to other people more than themselves. So this is the cerebrum. The cerebrum, being the biggest part of our brain, determines a lot about us. And so, how is your cerebrum as an individual right now? Look at your personality. Look at your intelligence. Look at your memory. Look at how you easily learn new things very fast. Languages. You learn things very fast. Or you are a bit of a slow learner. It's not a crime, but it's just self-awareness. Who am I? Me, I'm short-tempered. Honestly, you do me something, I'll easily pull out my anger. And I know myself, you can't use it against me. But then, what about you? How is your cerebrum? The other thing, it coordinates all high-end or high-level behaviors, such as your motor skills, problem-solving, judgments, planning, attention. All those things are highly controlled by the cerebrum. There are some people who are they're very good at judging. And they will not throw a judgment anyhow. They'll first go back to find what happened. How comes this person is behaving like this? They are so considerate. And there are some people, once something is done, they will not listen to you. They will judge you right away. Attention. The people are naturally not attentive in nature. They're always up and down. They do not perceive things. They take things the way they want. Whether something happens or not, they do not care. And then there are those people who are so careful. They are calculative in how they do their things. All that is the cerebrum. So, something to note here. Intelligence and the ability to learn new things is highly determined by your cerebrum. And it is highly determined by the surface area and the degree of development of your cerebrum. The larger the surface area and the more developed your cerebrum, the more intelligent you are, and the more the ability to learn new things. So, people or organisms with large cerebrums or cerebral hemispheres, they tend to have larger surface areas, and hence they also tend to have more neurons in their cerebrum, and thus those people perceive information very fast, and those people tend to have a higher reasoning capacity than others. Compared to our sisters in the other animal kingdom, we have the most developed cerebrum compared to the apes. And also within ourselves, different people have different intelligences, basing on the development of that part I have talked about. The second part is the thalamus. The thalamus, as you can see, it is that maroon part. Now the cerebrum is that folded part that is creamy white. Then below it we are having the pink part, that is the corpus callosum. Then below the corpus callosum, that is where we are having the thalamus. You can see it is maroon in color. It's also the forebrain. The thalamus is very important because it integrates all sensory impulses from your sensory organs, the eyes, the ears, the skin, and sends them to the cerebral cortex or to the cerebrum for processing, interpretation, and determining a feedback. Not only does it perceive information from your sensory organs I've mentioned about, it also perceives pain and pressure. When you are in pain and you're under high pressure, that part of the brain is very responsible. Below the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus. It's still maroon, just below. The thalamus is that expanded hip, and then the hypothalamus is just below. It's just below the thalamus. Its major function of the hypothalamus, it also has some good functions. One of them is it monitors and regulates all the homeostatic processes of your body, such as temperature regulation, osmoregulation, that is glucose regulations of the body. The next function of the hypothalamus is it initiates and controls all feelings. The so-called thirst, feeling of you want to sleep, you have higher appetite for this or the other thing, it is that. Hunger, sex drive, you want to have sex with this particular kind of a person, it is your hypothalamus. Love, wakefulness. So instead of lying to people's children that your heart, I hear my heart feels, my heart cannot, tell them my hypothalamus likes you a lot. Then it controls aggressive and reproductive behaviors. Here I look at when two animals, two male goats are chasing one female goat, or as you've seen dogs. The reproductive and aggressive ideas, the better and the most fit one will take the female than the other. So then you've seen the co-wives quarreling and fighting over one man. So their hypothalamus. Then it secretes hormones such as the androgenetic hormone and the oxytocin. These two hormones are secreted from the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. Now look at the pituitary gland. It's just below the hypothalamus, as you can see. It's pink, a pink lobe, just below the hypothalamus. It's from this pituitary gland that all endocrine hormones are secreted, and the endocrine glands are coordinated by it. But the two major hormones which are secreted by the pituitary gland and they are under control by the hypothalamus are androgenetic hormone and oxytocin. Androgenetic hormone is a hormone that regulates the water balance in your body. If you don't have enough water in your body, and then you'll have that feeling of you feel you're thirsty, and then you take in water. More water will be reabsorbed in your body, or maybe at the end of the day, you're going to produce very yellow, highly concentrated but smaller volumes of urine. And then the oxytocin hormone, it's the hormone that brings about labor pains. And it brings about contraction of the walls of the uterus until the baby is expelled out. So those two hormones are secreted from the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland under the influence and the action of the hypothalamus. The next part of the brain is the midbrain. The midbrain, as you can see, it's that red part, just below the maroon one. As I said, its major function is to link the forebrain and the hind brain. It's its major function. However, it also controls reflexes, like movement of the neck and the head and the trunk. Head, neck, and the trunk regions. Also, it controls most of your visual and auditory reflex actions. Visual is the ability to see. Auditory, hearing. So, such as they can control movement of your eyeball. You've seen people who play around with their eyeball, like the size of the pupil and the shape of the eyelids. Someone can look at you from down up in that way. Their midbrain is helping them, and they do not know even, but they are there trying. Then the other one is the hind brain that I am going to finalize with. The hindbrain, as I said, it's just behind the midbrain. As you can see, it's just down. It is made up of parts such as the cerebellum, that is the yellow stuff you're seeing. Then it's made up of the pons, that is the second portion of the red stuff under the midbrain. And then it's also made up of the medulla oblongata, the last part towards the brainstem. And then the brainstem that connects the brain to the spinal cord. We start with the pons, P-O-N-S. The pons, they contain nerves and relay impulses basically to the cerebellum. So the impulses they relay are impulses, say, from the fore and the midbrain towards the cerebellum. That is the major role of the pons. And then we move to the medulla oblongata, which is just below the pons. The medulla oblongata controls all involuntary activities. Remember, we said the cerebrum controls voluntary activities, things that you do and you're aware of them. You think about them and you decide you're going to do them or you're not going to do them. But here the medulla controls all reflex actions, what we call involuntary actions, things that you don't think about but you end up doing them, things that you do unconsciously, things like coughing, sneezing, vomiting, blood pressure, heartbeat, blinking of the eye, responding to a tickle, knee jerk, jerking of the hand from a hot object. All those reflex actions are controlled by the medulla oblongata. You do them unconsciously. And then the other part is now the cerebellum. Remember, amongst our questions I said, you ought to differentiate to compare the cerebrum from the cerebellum. First of all, you compare them with their spellings. The spellings are totally different. And their functions are totally different. Where they are located is totally different. The cerebrum, I said it's in the forebrain, controls voluntary activities. The cerebellum, it is in the hind brain. What does the cerebellum do? It coordinates your movements. So the ability to maintain balance and posture of the body during movement and equilibrium during locomotion basically is the role of the cerebellum. Not people. There are some people who be walking and then they fall all the time. When the wind comes for you, you fall. So if you cannot maintain balance, you do not have a good relationship with the center of gravity, then the challenge is your cerebellum. Cerebellum yo yekweyimirira. So that is the structure of the mammalian brain. Then the last part is the brainstem. As I said, it's just below the hindbrain. And it just connects your brain to the spinal cord down towards your backbone. So that is the brain, the major parts and their functions. But you should know that the overall function of the brain is it processes, interprets, integrates, and determines feedback to of information in order for them to be meaningful to you. And also, it also stores our memory, the ability to have very many experiences, the ability to learn from our past experiences are all by the brain. That is why abaganda baino olugero, let's see, is it what? When you a person who has ever encountered a snake, even when that person sees a rope, they run away. You can translate it in Luganda. So that is the brain. It stores memory of different experiences we go through. And then later on, we ought to learn from those experiences. So if you don't learn from your experience, then your brain has a challenge. Other than that, it also controls other things such as thoughts. Thoughts. How do you, what thoughts come through your mind? There are some people who keep on thinking vague and weird things. Either, if not sex, they are thinking about food, they are thinking about bidongo, bidula, they are thinking not developmental at all, shoes, expensive stuff. Their brain, memory, and speech. If you cannot stand and speak in a very articulate way, then your brain has a challenge. How do you get headache? Headache is a mixture of reactions between the brain muscles, nerves, and the muscles, the nerves of the head and the neck region. It's just something that is just a mixture of chemical reactions. That is why when you get painkillers or anything, you can have it cured. And so today, I only wanted to come and talk about the brain and the spinal cord. As I said, we have looked at the structure of the spinal cord and its function, the structure of the brain, and the functions of the major parts of the brain. The next time I come here, for the candidates, that will be the last time, we are going to look at the eye, the structure of the human eye, the mammalian eye, and the parts. How do we become short-sighted? How do we become long-sighted? How do those opticians determine which kind of spectacles we should use? How are we able to see in dim light, in bright light? So that is what we shall study the next time I come back here. Otherwise, the reference question for today's lesson has been, you got to compare and contrast for me the white matter and the gray matter, the cerebrum and the cerebellum. Other than that, I remain Jovia Katwaise for God and my country.
Bw'osomeseza omwana wo mu masomero ga Giant Schools omuli kampasi y'Ebombo Kalule n'eye Kabalagala toba bweraliikirivu bwonna olw'omusingi okutambuzibwa ebyenjigiriza n'ensoma y'abayizi ey'omulembe. Mu masomero gaffe gano gonna tusomesa arts ne sciences okuviira ddala ku siniya esooka okutuuka ku siniya ey'omukaaga nga tusomesa abaana okuviira ddala ku mutendero gwa kindergarten okutuuka ku kibiina eky'omusanvu. Tulina abasomesa abakugu mu kubangula abaana n'okubateekateeka. Ebyo ebibiina abaana mwe basomera eby'omulembe omuli buli kimu ekikwata ku ebyo bye basoma, ebisuula ebyazimbibwa obulungi, ebigazi ate nga biyonjo, okumanya ebisingawo tukubire ku nnamba z'essimu ez'owammanga.
Baby Junior Jelly mukwano gwaffe alina mukwano ogwa mama muweweevu era yakuma ensusu zaabwe buli kadde. Baby Junior Jelly, Baby Junior Jelly mukwano gwaffe.
Baby Junior Jelly ne Baby Junior Soap mukwano gw'abaana bange bwe mmala obbanaza mba sinnabijjayo bato bannaabwe nga baamulese dda. Ekyama anyiriza abeebasa bulungi, alina akawoowo akalungi, aziza okubutuka okuleetebwa diapers mulungi ne ku nsusu z'entondo.
Bikolebwa Movit.
Oh yeah, officially is my friend. I don't need to worry for the rest of my day. Kuna Matata, voice and data bundles. Free OTT. Now I can social distance, call you all day. Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna Matata, the newest bundle from Official. Lots of data, unlimited calls, and free OTT. Dial *133#. Select your preferred daily, weekly, or monthly bundle, and Hakuna Matata. Stay connected, stay safe. Official is regulated by Ghana Communications Commission.
Hakuna Matata.
Omuzadde ng'oteekateeka okunoonyeza omwana w'essomero ery'okumubangula mu bintu eby'enjawulo omuli ebyenjigiriza eby'omulembe n'okufuna amagezi ku bintu eby'emikono. Essomero liri limu lyokka, Janan Nursery and Primary School, erisangibwa Ebombo Kalule. Ffe tulina omusingi gw'ebyenjigiriza ebisookerwako nga tusomesa abaana okuviira ddala ku mutendero gwa kindergarten okutuuka ku kibiina eky'omusanvu. Tulina abasomesa abakugu mu kubangula abaana n'okubateekateeka. Ebibiina abaana mwe basomera eby'omulembe omuli buli kimu ekikwata ku ebyo bye basoma, ebisuula ebyazimbibwa obulungi, ebigazi ate nga biyonjo, kompawundi yaffe nga zibulungi nga n'endabika yayo eyamba omwana okulowooza ku ebyo by'asoma. Abayizi baffe bafuna akadde ak'okusinza mu madiini gaabwe ag'enjawulo. Wano ku Janan ebyokwerinda tuyitwala nga kikulu, anti tulina security camera ezisangibwa mu buli kasonda k'essomero. Abayizi baffe baweebwa omukisa okwetaba mu by'emizannyo eby'enjawulo omuli okuwuga, okusamba omupiira, basketball n'okuzannya netball. Tuvaayo ku by'obulamu nga tulina eddwaliro erikola